Good afternoon, colleagues. And you're welcome to this special section looking at reimagining higher education and scientific research. I will be moderating the first session, and we will then go to the second session after this. My name is Sam Awuku. I'm sure you've seen the program. We are managing time, so we try to make it very succinct and straight to the point. I would have loved to say a lot, but I'm not allowed to say a lot. What is important is to let you know that we're going to be discussing two questions, and I'm sure you've all seen the two questions for this session. Promoting appropriate policies and effective governance and accountability for a needs-driven and African-led national research and innovation. That's the first topic. And the second one, we'll be looking at building a skilled labor force to drive innovation and competitiveness in Africa, especially in STEM-related competencies and the role of higher education in building skilled entrepreneurs. That's beautiful, right? Somebody told me he can speak on that topic for the whole day, but unfortunately, we don't have the time. I will not go through the storyline because time is not on our side. You got a document, you will see the storyline there. But critically, we need to improve our research output as a continent, especially in areas of STEM. COVID has taught us a lot. And if you want to recap all of that, we'll not live here today. But how can we improve our research space? What role should the higher education sector be playing is very, very important. And as we discuss that, I'm sure you should also be reminding ourselves how we can prepare the pipeline. Because higher education does not sit in a vacuum, right? From KG up to high school, before they go to higher education, something needs to be happening. So as our experts here engage us in the topics we're going to be discussing, let's remind ourselves of what we can be doing to make sure the pipeline is not choked, is fluid, for us to get more people to go to higher education, for higher education to survive and live. So I will also not introduce the panel. What we do is that when it comes to each of them speaking, they will say something about themselves, right? If they are not able to say something about themselves, I will say it for them, okay? But then the first person who will speak is the expert in the area. Let me just get the name right. Yeah, it's Lenan, right? Detra. Okay, so Detra will say something about herself, and then you present as well. So she will present, and we hope by the time she finishes presenting, we'll have the Minister for Science and Technology from Uganda to respond before we go to our discussion. I've taken 2 minutes of your time, so you have about 8 minutes, okay? So if you can start your presentation, audience will listen to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Could you put my presentation up on the screen, please? Thank you. My name is Deidre Lennon. I work at the European Commission at the headquarters in Brussels, and I'm the team leader for human and social development in the framework of the Africa-EU partnership, so the partnership between the two unions. I wanted to give you some food for thought, but also show you some instruments and means which can be available for higher education to support the conversation and the ideas that come out of this afternoon's conversation, so to say. And I also wanted to explain to you what has come out of the recent Africa-EU summit, which took place, of heads of state, which took place in February last year, and the investments that are going to be made not only in higher education and education, but also in the other crucial areas around this, because I took note of what the Honourable Minister of Uganda said this morning when she's talking about the value chains. Where are the jobs of the future for Africa? Well, I think that is where higher education in Africa can look, and that's why I want to present to you today the whole picture so that you can see where investments are being made across the continent and where higher education can support these investments and the creation of jobs along it. In the summit, heads of state recognized the importance of progressing to a knowledge-based economy and put skilled human capital at the center of this. The main sort of issues, challenges that they wanted to see addressed were to encourage partnerships between universities on both continents, boosting human development, scaling up mobility and employability. These are both terms that we heard this morning in the presentations by the ministers. Promote opportunity-oriented TVET, including at regional level. These are sort of the statements that came out of the summit. But as we said, I think it was Albert that said this morning, how do we move from declarations into action? Well, the offer that the European Union made at the summit was an offer of 150 billion euro, which are going to be put into various sectors across Africa in the next 6 years now, until 2027. And this offer is called the Africa-Europe Global Gateway Investment Package. The idea is that by putting funds into certain areas, you can leverage additional funds. So we're putting together the offer of the European Commission and also all our member states, the financial institutions, the banks, all working together in one common direction, because that will create investment, further investment and jobs. The Global Gateway is our strategy for connecting people across the world. It's focusing in particular on global challenges, which all regions are facing. And for Africa, for the Africa-EU Global Gateway Investment Package, the focus are on these areas. And these are the areas I'd like you to think about when you're thinking about innovation. Higher education, if we can develop this capacity to innovate in these areas, since there will be significant investment made in these areas, universities across Africa can find their place there. Graduates can be upskilled, or programs can be made available so that this capital is able to support the investments being made in these different sectors. So we have the green transition, the digital transition, growth and jobs when I'm thinking of transport corridors, health, we've seen after the pandemic, the EU very much wants to support Africa, have its health sovereignty. We've got the hubs which are being built up in 4 African countries to produce the vaccines. These are all areas where the university capacity needs to be strengthened and where the private sector, the public sector and universities can work together. We have specific focus also on higher education and on education. I'll go into that now. Sorry. It's through sort of this narrative, so to say, that we would like, through our programs, the funding opportunities that are being made available, that partnerships get together and sort of set up a course of action, undertake research together, develop new programs, and such like, develop the innovation capacities in higher education so that they can respond to these particular areas of investment in the coming years. Just to give you an overview in financial terms and in terms of what we call flagship initiatives. So these are initiatives that we're making available in the field of education, but also the field of research and innovation, which are going to support this Global Gateway investment package. So for the current financing framework until 2027, we'll be making available 6 billion euro, of which the bulk will be for Africa. So these are this is mainly implemented through national programs, so interventions at national level. 43 countries across Africa have chosen skills, education as priority sectors for investment. Then we have flagship initiatives at regional level, which are being developed at the moment. We have a regional teacher program, which will be due out next year. Opportunity-driven skills and VET in Africa. I can mention that, or you can come and see me after also for more information on that. Youth mobility flagship. Some of you will already know about this. It's Erasmus, it's the Intra-Africa Mobility Program, it's the HAQUA initiative. They're all packaged, so to say, in there, but with significantly more funding. And then we have the Global Partnership for Education, where all our EU member states and ourselves, European Commission, are putting funding into that. At continental level, we have a relationship with the African Union, whereby we can support CESA 2016-2025, and we want to see how we can have help the African Union have a more transformative and impactful trickle-down effect or trickle-up effect, depending on where you're situated, across the continent. For sake of time, I'm not going to go into skills and VET, but you can ask me questions about it. The Youth Mobility for Africa is mainly to promote exchanges of students and staff across both with Europe and across Africa. That's very important. We're not trying to, attract all students to Europe. That's not the point. We want to facilitate the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. For that, you need to have a more harmonized system. Your universities need to recognize each other's study programs and qualifications. So this mobility is sort of pushing that process and supporting that process. In terms of funding Erasmus, there is now 4 times more funding for Erasmus with Africa. The first call came out last year, and results are being made available. We got another call coming out in November, the Intra-Africa Mobility Program, the harmonization of African higher education quality assurance, and Abdou Cissé from ANACSUP will talk about that in the next session, the African Continental's qualifications framework, and youth actions, youth leadership actions also. These are the instruments I'd like to point your attention to, because this is where the funding is. And this is where countries, universities, so ministries, agencies, councils, universities, and individuals, students and staff can find opportunities for funding. Erasmus, you can see here the examples of the first projects that were financed this year are all in core priority areas for the creation of jobs in Africa, in agro-entrepreneurship, access to electricity, space, energy, mining, and healthcare. I think these are all areas which are evidently important and can support growth on the continent. The HAQUA initiative, which developed the standards and guidelines for quality assurance in higher education, the agency for quality assurance and accreditation at continental level. The AU-EU Innovation Agenda, if the minister from Uganda, because she's the chair of the STC, if she was here, she'd recognize that, because she is sort of the African representative, talking to the EU member states on this innovation agenda. Horizon Europe, that's the research and innovation program, which is available for Africa also. Marie Curie actions, which are actions for mobility of researchers, training of researchers, and the ARISE program, which is in fact managed by the Academy of Science here, the African Academy of Science. So the funding is available there, and I really encourage you to avail of it. Picking up from this morning's session and concluding on this slide, I think we've taken back the message that we need to translate declarations into action. I'm offering you the means here to be able to avail of these opportunities. Particularly important to support innovation and transformation linked to the industrial value chains and the jobs of the future, continental integration, and more coordination and more alignment between partners who are working here in the continent with African universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well. Right. Minister is not here, so we need a policy response. The policy response is very simple. Is that we have a lot of work to do. Okay, right. So somebody want to sabotage me, but that not happen. We have a lot of work to do because when we, clearly, we saying that when we talk about STEM-related research on the continent, we're talking about 29%, right? Our focus as a continent is more into infrastructure and all the other things. Scientific research is not a priority. And so we have a lot of work to do, right? So wherever we're coming from, whatever organizations we are involved in, we need to make that a priority. If not, we will not get to where we want to get as a continent. Decisions need to be based on scientific findings. If you're constructing roads, building bridges, what's the research informing that? Right? COVID came. We have to wait and get leftover vaccines from some places. Are we able to do that as a continent, to do research in those areas and be able to come out with groundbreaking research findings that can actually lead to human welfare development, human capital development? Are we able to do that as a continent? What are the factors preventing us from doing those things? From high school to university, what's the interest of youngsters in science itself? How many scientific researchers do we have on the continent? How old are they? In the next 10 years, how many of them will be active researchers? And what are they doing to take care of succession planning? It's like some of the critical questions we got to be asking from policy perspective. Minister is not here. I'm not a minister. But I think if I'm the minister, those are some of the questions I'll be asking myself. Thank you very much. Is there any minister here? There's no minister. Any deputy minister? Any director? Any minister to be here? We have potential ministers here. Right, okay. So you... State level, right. Can you respond? We have 1 minute. Can you respond to what they've said? Yes. Can you get the microphone? Yeah.
Thank you. So coincidentally, at my state level, we are also in the process of reforming our tertiary institutions. And one of the questions that we have been asking our academics and scholars is, what is the purpose of our higher institution? What is their contribution to the economic expansion of our state? So we don't really get any tangible response. What we get is more like, how dare you? You don't know what you are talking about. And the other thing we are trying to push also is this idea of Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. The idea that just because you have a PhD or that you are a professor, that you can impact knowledge. So there's stiff resistance to that as well. I'm aware that a few years back, there was the Carnegie Higher Education Initiative for some African countries. I'm not sure what came out of that whole funding circle. So when I see what you've just presented, it's exciting, but there's also, and so what? You know what I mean? So, at the end of the day, it's all these development partners, countries, putting money supposedly into African education, and we don't seem to be going anywhere. So is it time for us to really tell ourselves the truth? To really look at for what purpose? What are we trying to achieve, right? And how much of this funding actually go into these schools? Because you raised something about COVID. I mean, look at in my country, for instance, you know, professors are now publishing religious tracts. So it's like, how is that intellectual output? So there is a lack of intellectual curiosity that is just mind-boggling. So I don't know, I'm just talking, but we have a lot of work to do.
Thank you very much. So the policy response is that we have a lot of work to do. So because we have a lot of work to do, we also have here experts who also share with us their thinking around the amount of work we need to do. I'm supposed to have about 5 of them, but I only have 3 here. So you have extra time, right? You have extra time. So let's see. I think what we'll do basically, I have a set of questions that I will ask you that will enable us to delve a bit more into the issue we're talking about, reimagining higher education and scientific research. So the first question, any of you can take it. Any of you can take the first question. Is, do we have any evidence of policies working and then related to governance system that deliberately focus on promoting national research that are African initiated and African led? Do we have any evidence of that? Because we are talking about the space is a bit weak. We have only 1% in scientific research that is globally, and then we have 29% STEM related. Do we have any evidence that there are policies, there are robust governance systems that actually, they are not imported, borrowed, but African initiated and African led? National level. Can anybody think of any? I know we have the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, AIMS. That's a Pan-African initiative started by Professor Neil Turok, a South African, trying to build up the scientific research ecosystem on the continent. I know they have a center in South Africa, they have one in Cameroon, they have one in Senegal, Tanzania, and Rwanda, and Ghana, right? The plan was to open about 23 of them by 2020 something, but it didn't happen. Pardon? No. AIMS is a Pan-African Center. Makerere as well, right. So there's one, so that's in Uganda. Okay, can you open your mic and tell us a bit more about that?
Sorry, no, Makerere University is sort of coordinating the RU Forum in agriculture research centers. Yeah, yeah. But it's a center of excellence, so sort of advanced research in that area. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other one, right?
I think the commissioner talked about Carnegie. We have the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship Program, and this is normally where you have a scholar exchange program for African higher education institution, and most of these African institutions host scholars from the diaspora for about 14 to 90 days, and they're involved in various projects across the curriculum co-development, research collaboration, and in some cases, graduate student teaching and mentoring. And I've attended a number of these interactions, and there are a number of Kenyan researchers and university faculty who are involved in this and benefiting. The aspect is, if we have some of our best in the diaspora, how are they giving back to to the community. And the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship Program is one of them. And I think we have several national programs that are encouraging collaborations in terms of research. Normally I say we have the policies. The issue is, do we implement those policies? And do we monitor to see whether we are making progress based on the policies that have been put in place? That's just my sympathy of that.
Thank you very much. Darius didn't mention his name, so Darius yes. He's the director for university education in Kenya, so that's why he's here. So the question one is that we have a pocket of best practice. However, the last point Darius mentioned is very important. We are very good as a continent to have policies, but when it comes to implementation, that we have a problem. And the analogy I always use is this, that we have forest of policies. But when you walk through them, you can't see any fruit, right? And the work that we say we have to do is to make sure that the fruits are evident for everybody to see. And for those policies, or the trees, which are called the policies in the forest, we need to nurture them, give them the right nutrients, and that's what we want to hear, right? So we'll go to Darius now to tell us, you've heard the discussion from yesterday up to today. Minister from Uganda eloquently challenged us, and we have the Deputy Prime Minister also say a lot, and the whole day you've heard things about higher education, right? Are you able to clearly tell us, from your experience as Director for Higher Education or Secondary University Education in Kenya, whether the researches that been done by our universities are actually meeting the priorities of our continent? If not, what do we do? If yes, what are the evidence for us to see?
Thank you very much, and I'll give the example of Kenya. So the answer to your question is yes and no. And my name is Darius Mogaka Ogutu, Director University Education, Ministry of Education in Kenya. So why I say yes and no, it's because lots of research could be happening in our universities. But then the question is, where is this research published? Where is the output from this research put out to the public? Who knows what the professors are doing in the universities? And maybe we do not have the visibility that we need to have from our universities. But I'll give the example of Kenya. I look at universities or higher education institutions as being at the intersection of academia and industry. They link with industry. They link with the private sector. In any case, they are training and doing research for industry. And in most cases, I look at universities, some part of university, as finishing schools. Immediately these products, if we call them graduates, graduate from the institutions of higher learning, then they are expected to be absorbed in society. They're expected to contribute to the economy. But then how do we enhance that linkage with industry? How do we make sure that it works for both sides so that industry contributes to research and development, which internally then also enables the industry to grow because they get the best trained in the market. And in Kenya, we have the National Council for Science, Technology and Innovation, NACOSTI, that looks at matters research in related to ST&I. It acts as a regulator and sets research priorities that are aligned to the development goals of the country. Then we have the National Research Fund, which to some little extent tries to finance research activities in the higher education institutions. And this may be through purchasing of current equipment, research and science, technology, engineering equipment that will enable the universities produce graduates who are conversant with the latest technology in the world. Then through the National Research Fund, and it's a competitive opportunity for universities to apply for research funding. Kenya is trying to raise its allocation towards research to see whether research can be a direct input towards the development of the country. Then we have the Kenya National Innovation Agency. This is an agency that has been tasked with issues of technology transfer, looking at innovations, inventions, patents, and looking for ways of commercializing them. Because in most cases, and this is a dilemma we face with higher education, they do research, they come up with innovations, but then they say they are not entrepreneurs, so you don't expect them to commercialize them. They say that is a different business. So how do we link the researchers and their innovations or inventions and patents with aspect of commercializing them, making sure they are working for the citizens? And then through that, looking at the whole research and development ecosystem. Yes, you are a researcher. You come up with new ideas, you come up with new solutions. How then do you put them to the market, and how do they become profitable and of use to the country? I'll give some examples. And like the Covishield, it's a joint collaborative exercise among researchers to be able to offer a solution to a pandemic. Look at the issue of malaria prevention and treatment. Kenyan universities have been participating with their counterparts from the United States of America, United Kingdom, and other parts of Africa, together with the CDC's Centers for Disease Control, to come up with better ways of dealing with issues to do with malaria. Same to do with HIV and AIDS. All these are examples where researchers in our universities are doing the best they can with the rest of their counterparts in the world to solve human problems. In a different discussion, I think earlier in the day today, one of the panelists said that the best teacher who can make a difference in African schools is that teacher in a rural setup. And all he or she needs to do, is a different way of teaching. Now, from where I stand, the best researchers we have in Kenya, the best researchers we have in Africa, are in our African universities, in our Kenyan universities. And all that we need to do is provide them with resources and give them a different modality of bringing forth the fruits of their labor, so to say, and making sure that this contributes towards the development of the country. We normally talk about resource scarcity. Of course, the quoted aspect of whether our countries are allocating 2% of their GDP to research. We haven't reached that level yet. But how do we mobilize resources, whether it's from venture capitalists, whether it's from angel investors or philanthropy, towards funding research in our universities? And how does this research directly impact on the economy? And that's how I'm looking at it, and hoping that in future, and we were talking with my colleague here, that there are things we can learn from Mauritius, for example, and there are things Mauritius can learn from Kenya. And together, from peer learning and peer exchanges, we can push the research agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You see what he did? He set his own question and answered it. So, so that's very good. He started by saying the answer is yes or what? No. No, in the sense that the researchers are not aligned with our priorities. Then for yes is what governments are doing to make sure that they are aligned. Beautiful, you are such a great student. You get an A for that. You want to say something at this stage? Do you want to note it down, or you want to say it now?
Well, I can say it now.
You want to say it now? Okay. Because you are from Kenya. Yes. So you want to, are you going to align the priorities to the research, or? Okay.
Thank you very much. Sorry for my voice. This is not the way it normally is, but this is courtesy of the celebration yesterday. I was trying to speak beyond my voice, and this happened. My name is Francis Aduol. I'm Vice Chancellor of the Technical University of Kenya in Nairobi, and I'm also a member of the Council of Association of Commonwealth Universities, so I'm here wearing two hats. I'm going to say something about Association of Commonwealth Universities a little later, if I'll be given time. But I want to just dovetail on what he has said. Yes, African scholars are doing excellent research, and Africa has some of the best scholars you can get anywhere in the world. And I always say this, African scholars have a special advantage that many universities in the world don't have. You go to any university, put any 10 professors in one room, and you have the whole world in front of yourself, because you will find that they will have gotten degrees from everywhere in the world in that small group of 10 people. Now you can imagine the impact that is going to bring in that country alone. Unfortunately, we are not able to make full use of this because, one, university professors are obliged to carry out research, and whoever gives them the opportunity to do so, they are going to follow that person. And research requires money, and the people who bring in the money are not necessarily from Africa. And when they come in with the money, they give you conditions which you should follow if you're going to get their money to do the research. So a lot of research we are carrying out is ending up elsewhere and not necessarily in Africa. So that is problem number one. Problem number two is, as Darius has said, even where we carry out local research, it is very difficult to translate this into practical results for the simple reason that the university professor is never an entrepreneur, and they will never try to be so, because you can't be a professor and an entrepreneur at the same time. It doesn't work. There's somebody else is supposed to be an entrepreneur, but the link between the professor and that somebody else is industry. And unfortunately, African universities don't work too well with industry. That is one of the reasons why all this good research gets lost. I just wanted to make that comment for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very true. Right. So we've heard our brother trying to do three things in one, and he's done it successfully. Let's now try Prof. Kiran and see how he will go about it. In Darius's submission, he tried to preempt what I'm going to be asking you, right? So just for you to tell us, because I said earlier, when it comes to the vaccine research, our contribution was about 1%. STEM research is about 29%, right? In Sub-Saharan Africa, that's what we do. Now, we are curious to know some of the success factors, the enablers, right? 29% will not happen in a vacuum, isn't it? There might be some factors that has enabled those to happen. If we know them, probably we can find a way to scale it up, isn't it? So you can tell us, share with us, right? You can situate it within your country and then move to the global stage. The global stage is a mini continent of Africa, right? So take it for us.
Thank you, Chair.
Introduce yourself. If you don't do it, I will do it for you.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.
My name is Kiran Berjan. I think you've heard my voice for the whole of the day, so that should be enough. I'm Director of Tertiary Education and Scientific Research at the level of the Ministry of Education of Mauritius. And it's my pleasure to be here. It's my pleasure to welcome you once again to Mauritius. So to answer your question, Chair, I think, and I'm going to give you an unorthodox answer, we need first to understand, when we're talking of scientific research, this does not happen at the level of higher education. Higher education is this tip of the iceberg where we get those who have been interested in science and STEM projects and STEM subjects, to go and further their interest. STEM subjects and the interest into doing research should start much much earlier. And this is why I feel that if we have to talk about the interest or the enrollment into scientific research, we should target kids, primary school students, secondary school students, and build their interest into STEM subjects. If I take the case of Mauritius, Mauritius has a 13-year schooling system. Grade 1 to grade 6 is where we are in what we call the primary schools. Then grade 7 to 9 is the junior secondary. And at the end of grade 9 is where those students get to choose which field or which sector they will join. Is it the accounting field? Is it the engineering field? Is it to do maths and physics and chemistry, or to do arts or something else? So if that is the case, it means that if we need to have STEM subjects, if we have to have scientific research at the level of of university, we need to be targeting those students already at grade 9, isn't it? At the time when they decide to choose the field in which they're going. And for us to be able to get them to be interested at grade 9, which is typically about 15 years of age, we need to make them understand what is the interest in for them, what is the benefit for them to be joining science subjects. I think all of us at some point of time, of all of us here, have been doing strategy for most part of our life. And if this is so, I believe that we should now be looking at the enrollment into scientific research as some kind of a marketing exercise more than anything else. How do we look at millennials? How do we look at Generation Z? And how do we make these kids get interested into science from the very early age? And the way we've been looking at this, and I don't have the answer, so I'll go with what my friend Darius say. I'll give you an answer, but it is but you know, we've been talking about it because Mauritius is right now, we are sitting down, we're still planning a national science and technology strategy, which implies that we don't have one yet. And the way we've been thinking about it, we have a conceptual framework and all that, and we do understand that for us to encourage people into science, we need first to go to primary schools and secondary schools and start doing outreach activities. And I know academics are very good at this. Academics are always very good at talking and boasting what they have done. Why don't you go and boast about it in primary school, secondary school, speak the language of the layman, of the kids, and make them understand, make them get interested into what science is. Don't give them a tablet, but show them what you can do with this tablet. Show them what you can do by doing different programming out of this tablet. And this might be what triggers the interest. So my solution, at least, would be first to go out and do outreach in the hope that this outreach will trigger more interest, more curiosity, like you said initially, Chair, and that would lead to a natural selection of research. But that's just one. Along with doing outreach, we also need to ensure that there is this link between scientific research on one side and the demand side of scientific research. And usually, I believe that the demand side of scientific research is industry. Mauritius is a little bit disadvantaged on this because most of the industry in Mauritius are not doing R&D. Mauritius, as you're aware, is a heavy importer of goods and different items, foodstuff, etc. There is not really the need to do R&D. Maybe if there was any pocket of activities that was doing R&D, this is where we could have this link between the demand, the need to create a product, or the need to improve a product, and this is where scientific research would come in. So do we have the right factors, or do we have the right formula yet? I'm not very sure, but we need to generate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I like the way you, thank you, that's great. I like the way you position it within filling the pipeline. And I'm going to throw this question to all of you again. Now, do we think our school system generally is a limiting factor for youngsters having interest in the subject? For example, you are in high school. In some countries, they say you are a science student, right? when you're already labeled that for you, you are a science student, so you have to do science. You are a business student, so you follow business programs. You're a visual arts student, so you follow visual arts. So by the time you are 10, 15, 16, you are told you cannot do science. You are visual arts. You are labeled. You are boxed. Do you think that's a limiting factor? If yes, what can we do? Yes.
Chair, allow me to answer this one as well. If you'd remember, at the time when we were all most probably of the same age, the time we were in secondary school, we were doing Cartesian equations, and we're doing X, Y, Z, isn't it? And some of us were doing X, Y, Z, and then cylindrical coordinates or theta. Over time, and I saw this on a post on Facebook, it's very funny and it's very interesting. We are no longer doing X, Y, Z, or theta. We are just doing, this is the square, define X. Over time, there has been impoverishment of curriculum to the point where the curriculum has been offloaded to such an extent that the student now is not enough, there's not enough curiosity allowed it. I'll just tell you a story. Every morning I drive from the highlands of Mauritius towards the capital, and the east is on this side, and my son sits at the back in my car, and we drive at 6, 7 o'clock, so he sees the rising sun on this side and the moon on that side. And he keeps telling me, how can we have the sun and the moon at the same time? And I keep feeling very sorry for myself, because I would not have asked this question in my time, because the curriculum then would have shown me that there is this rotation of the earth around the sun and how the planets move. And I did that with him. I bought a ball, I took my mobile, I put the flashlight there. What I'm saying is, it's a question of the curriculum being made so easy now because we feel our kids are too fragile to assimilate all of that.
The youngsters will fight with you if you say the curriculum is made easy. Last Sunday, I was watching a program, and the youngsters are saying that they say there is artificial intelligence that's more intelligent than them. Adults are lying, right? So that's what it is. But quickly, you should say that there is an initiative that the Ghana is trying. The people who have done visual arts, for example, they can go to university and do pre-engineering course, pre-degree, right? First year, if they're successful, then they progress to do pure engineering, all right? It's very interesting. When we had National Education Week last week, and some of these youngsters came demonstrating what they are doing is marvelous. Engineering involves a lot of drawing. Science involves a lot of drawing. Somebody who does visual arts, what can they go and do engineering drawing, for example? Right? But we limit and we box them. So I think we need to be thinking along the way the youngsters are thinking. That's one of the things I want to say about the factors, the enablers that will make that happen. So this link to Doc Fury's question I'm going to ask you. You know, talking about scientific research, we know that when it comes to manpower issues or human labor, right? The labor industry on our continent, our focus is on manpower development, about technology use and all of that. We are talking about research, scientific research. In what ways can you explain to us, help us understand how scientific research can also, or the interplay between scientific research and labor markets, the interplay between them, and how we can do that more to inform more human capital development for the labor market on our continent and for the global market. Right.
Well, thank you. So my name is Martha Piri, and I'm Director for Human Capital, Youth, and Skills Development at the African Development Bank. And let me just unpack it a little so you can understand where the human capital is coming from. So I have responsibility for education and skills development at the African Development Bank. And if you would allow me, it's my pleasure to introduce my manager, Henrina Doroba. So if education is not working on the continent, blame her. And she has, of course, her staff, Keiko, Takei. She's our Chief Education Specialist. So we have an education team under the Human Capital Department, but we also have, importantly, the public health team. And what a time to be talking about public health with what's going on. So we have public health, but we also have social protection at the same time. We also have nutrition. And finally, we also have job creation. So it's an expansive department with the mandate really to invest in African people so that we have a quality workforce that can drive the Africa we want by 2063. So that's a short, long introduction. But it's a pleasure, Mr. Moderator, to really join this very interesting group of panelists. And thank you, Deirdre, Prof, and the director from Kenya. So to answer your question, allow me, if you may, to just set the context. And I would like to set the context in the sector that is our biggest employer on the continent, and that is agriculture. And I'll start from this point of view to say Africa is a young continent. By 2063, when we'll be looking back to look at the results we have achieved to build the Africa we want, there will be 2 billion people of working age on the continent, 2 billion. Half of them, 1 billion, will be young people. Now, the tragedy is this. As we speak now, 8 out of 10 young people who join the labor market every year don't find jobs in the formal market. 8 out of 10. So they are either unemployed or in the informal sector where wage is extremely poor. So no wonder we're having the difficulties that we were talking about with the Honorable Minister this morning. What gives us hope that we can capture this enormous labor force, is the agriculture sector. The agriculture sector, as we speak, employs 60% of our people. And it should be the solution to our problems, but it isn't. Why not? It remains subsistent, it remains informal, it remains a sector that does not create jobs at all. If anything, it provides poor jobs. No wonder then we have food insecurity and malnutrition rampant on the continent. No wonder we import $85 billion of food imports every year. No wonder agricultural productivity is so low. At the same time, no wonder we export agricultural raw products. Now, we have countries on the continent that have successfully transformed agriculture sector to make it work so that it is commercially driven, it creates quality jobs for our youth, it captures the domestic market. The question is, what have they done to do that? The central key factor is agricultural research that provides innovative local solutions to local problems. If you look at South Africa, if you look at Morocco, if you look at Tunisia, and I'll give an example of Ethiopia now. These are countries on the continent, and I believe, I'm just selecting these examples. I know that there are some countries that have successfully done this as well. If you look at these countries, what they have done at the center of their agricultural policy agenda has been research that works for the local economy. That is why. Now, coming to your question, besides manpower and technology, what will it take for Africa to transform its agriculture sector so that it can create jobs? I would like to submit, Mr. Moderator, and if you allow me, 4 key issues that have been successfully deployed in some of these countries that I've shared to make sure that agriculture is transformed. The first and foremost is to make sure that the agricultural policy agenda is country-owned and country-led. It's country-owned and country-led. So that the agricultural policy research then answers the specific questions that the agriculture sector in those countries are impacted with in terms of structural bottlenecks. And I'll give example where country-owned and country ownership has produced tremendous results. And this is where I'm coming to Ethiopia. The African Development Bank with the government of Ethiopia partnered under what they call Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Program. Under this program, what they did, looking at Ethiopia as really drought-stricken country, it suffers from frequent droughts. But at the same time, you find that most of the farmers are not indulging in irrigation. So what they did was to come up with heat-tolerant and high-yielding wheat varieties under this START program. Just within 5 years, Ethiopia was a wheat importer. But as we speak now, the government has indicated that even with the war in Ukraine and Russia, this year they have produced enough wheat to satisfy the domestic market. And looking at next year and the year after, they are sure that they will start working on exporting wheat. It took research to make sure that they have the necessary varieties to drive this. Why it is important that it should be driven by a policy agenda that is locally, engineered, is because once the government takes the lead, the partners come in and they feel embodied because there is a clear agenda. And when that happens, the partnerships work. At the same time, the second point that is important, and I know you are looking at me, I think this is extremely useful. Yes, the second point that is extremely important is on building partnerships around that policy. So I've heard a lot of things here about driving research and stuff like that, but what we have forgotten is to listen to the communities themselves. Listen to the farmers. Listen to the civil society organizations that represent these farmers. But at the same time, look at what the private sector can do, because they are essentially interested in having robust supply chains to make sure that they develop their economies. And then make sure that the financing, both domestic resource mobilization, but as well as international financing, speak to the issues that the agricultural policy agenda talks about. The third point is about sustainability. Sustainability has 3 lanes which are critical as we speak. Africa only contributes 1/3, even less than 1%, I think, to green and climate issues. But then 9 out of 10 African countries are the most vulnerable in the world to climate change. So having research, agricultural research that is responsive to the green and climate resilient agenda is key. Youth lens, to make sure that agriculture, you make it cool. Agriculture should be sexy for the youth. Otherwise, they're not interested. So making sure that their innovative ideas are translated into agriculture as a business. Women are involved in agriculture, but in most cases, we don't listen to them. They are always taken as beneficiaries, but women should be researchers themselves. We should be talking about plant breeders as women. The last point that I want to speak about is about data, the 4th point. So there is country ownership and leadership in terms of policy partnerships, sustainability lens, data and information systems, just to make sure we know where we're starting from, how we're making progress, and where we will be or where we have reached at point X or Y. Lastly, let me say this. In the end, what matters is how we invest in human capital. And the African Development Bank, with lessons from the COVID-19, found an opportunity to develop what we call an action plan for skills for employability and productivity in Africa that essentially focuses on building infrastructure for higher education STEM as well as TVET, but also facilitating digital skills and online learning infrastructure. And to this extent, I would like to take the opportunity to invite all of you. Next year, the bank will be hosting our president, together with President His Excellency Ouattara in Cote d'Ivoire and the African Union Commission. We will be hosting the Science, Technology, and Innovation Forum at the African Development Bank headquarters in Cote d'Ivoire around February. So all of you are invited so we can continue this conversation because time is a limiting factor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let's give another applause to our panelists. We don't have time, so we'll end it here. But just to say that, one, we need to have policies to drive research, and policy need to be locally and nationally driven for ownership. And two, our research agenda needs to be focused. We should not do anything anyhow. If we know that agriculture is this area that will give us the best chance, let's look at that and research into that. Every other thing is important, right? If you do those two things, we'll have enough leverage on what we have already and then think about what we do not have. Thank you all very much for joining this session. I will hand you over now. My brother wants to talk, but I've been told that we had 3 minutes left 5 minutes ago. So we'll leave it here. I will show you what to do. When the next panel comes, raise your hand and make contribution and say what you wanted to say. So I'll hand you over to Professor Rumela Mohin, who will take the next session. So all of you, thank you so much. This is like a marathon, but we've done it, right? So let's go and implement it. Thank you very much. You know, I didn't see the clapping. Clap for us.